the front of house went down, and the guy pulled down the whole mix and stopped. And I told them all, I said, I'm sorry, I can't have you up here. I'm gonna get in all kinds of trouble. It bashed into my shin, and it hurt so bad, and my legs swelled up to the point where you could see it swollen underneath my pants. I apologized to the crowd. I told everybody, listen, I'm really sorry. I'm going to get through this as best I can, but you guys all know the words. So there was no hot water and no heat. And this was in probably the beginning of February, the height of ski season.
All right. Michael, what's up, my man? How you doing today?
Not much. How you doing? It's nice
Great,
to
thank
nice
you.
to see you, and
Nice to see
thanks
you.
for yeah, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
I'm gonna jump right in, my man. Jumping right in. So
Sounds
how
great.
long have you been performing on stage for?
I have been performing. Wow, it's gonna age me. So it's been 40 years.
Veteran, stage veteran, man. Love it.
Yeah, yeah.
What's the furthest you've ever traveled for a gig?
Probably Pearl Harbor would be the furthest in distance.
Nice.
Um, we were fortunate enough to do 4th of July at Pearl Harbor for the troops, and it was an amazing experience. Yeah, that was really something that is still a highlight for me.
It's amazing, man. When I see you, man, first of all, you're incredible. Your shows are incredible. You're a fabulous singer. You've got this
Thank you.
confidence about you. We both know no matter how much you practice, no matter how much you prepare, we're just human at the end of the day. It's not always your fault, my fault. Things just happen.
Yeah.
We're going to get into that a little bit here, and it's okay to laugh about these things.
Yeah, totally. You have to laugh about them because they're going to happen anyways.
Yeah.
So you might
Uh,
as well,
We'll jump right in with it, man. Have you experienced any embarrassing moments while performing on stage before?
Uh, yeah, I mean, so in the U2 tribute stuff, there's always possibilities for there to be something that happens. And a show that we just did, just St. Patrick's Day this year. It was not on St. Patrick's Day, but it was one of the St. Patrick's Day run of shows. And we got there, and the production company had clearly not read our tech writer, and they were contracted to provide us with in-ear audio mixes, where we would bring our own earbuds, but they would provide the transmitters and the receivers. And so we got there, and they were late on getting set up, so we didn't get a sound check, and all we got was a line check. And before they started line checking us, they said, well, let's go ahead and just get a line check because you're probably not going to have time to get in a song. And so we said, well, why don't we go ahead and line check our in-ears as well as front of house, since we're running so close on time. I mean, we need to know that we have signals in our ears as
It's
well.
stressful too.
It was stressful, yeah. And the guy, the guy looked at us and he was like, what do you mean in-ears? And we were like, yeah, you guys are providing us with in-ears. And he just lost his mind like immediately. He was like, next year you guys are you're gonna have to start bringing your own stuff. And I mean, we covered all of this in all of the pre-production meetings with the talent buyer and with the production company, and we were
You did
like,
all
this,
your part. You did what you could.
yeah, we showed up and we have everything that we said we were going to have, and you guys are supposed to bring this other stuff. So, anyways, we ended up just doing a real cursory check, and then when it came time for the show, like we couldn't hear anything.
Right.
And so we had to stop the show and deal with some technical issues, like right after the first couple of songs.
In
We were
front of
able to
the
get through the
audience.
first we were able to get through the first couple of songs. And fortunately, the audience that comes to that, they've seen us every year for the last 14 years. They understand what we're dealing with. They know that we don't have a full crew like a typical, touring band has. All of us wear several hats on stage. So when we have those technical issues, I just call it out and I just say, listen, guys, you know what we're dealing with. We've got some technical stuff. We're going to take the time to fix it now so the rest of the show can be good. And people are really good natured about it. So, you know, those are the kinds of things that after the fact, you just have to laugh about them because, there's no other way to go about it.
Right.
The show still has to go. So it's not like you can get stuck or hung up on that.
Uh, countless times that's happened to me, man. Just like that, just like you said, and even maybe worse, like
Yeah.
countless.
Yeah.
And of course, that's when they come and see you and go, I don't know, I don't know. I saw you guys that way. And I'm like, oh, that night you saw us? Oh, let me tell you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's why we're here, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Let me ask you, has there ever been a show where you had to push through an illness? Like, what's the most sick you've ever been while performing on stage?
Yeah, I was really sick. We did a show in Dallas at the Gardens. We actually did the show 2 years in a row. And the first year that we were there, it was good. It was a decent turnout. And so they brought us back the next year, and I developed laryngitis literally the day before, and just thought, well, I'm gonna do what I can to power through the show. We didn't want to cancel. Flights had already been booked and everything was lined up. And so we went, and doing tea and honey and doing everything I could to try to, to get it addressed. One of my friends gave me a Z pack that their doctor had given them that they never used. So I started, taking those. And we got there, and in sound check, it was seeming like it was going to be okay. And we thought, okay, this might be all right. We got through sound check, we started the show, and within the third song, my voice was gone. And it was, I mean, it was literally, I could hit maybe a couple of notes in just the main lower part of my range, enough to speak. And so, I apologized to the crowd. I told everybody, listen, I'm really sorry. I'm going to get through this as best I can, but you guys all know the words. And they were amazing. The crowd was absolutely incredible. The real hardcore fans sang every song right with us. And we ended up getting through it, and it was one of those experiences that I was so freaked out about it beforehand. And as we got through the first couple of songs, and then by the time the crowd really knew what was going on, because we just came out with it, it made me have such a great appreciation for what the mentality is for people at live shows, because everybody's really just there to have a good time. And
Right.
nobody was looking at it as a way to disparage us or make us feel like less than pro.
I mean, I can't describe the emotions, man. It's hard. There's guilt,
Yeah.
embarrassment, anxiety, fear. You feel like you're
Yeah.
being judged. You feel like you're letting people down. There's so much stress. It's so hard, and I don't think people understand what we go through sometimes like this. It's a
Yeah.
lot.
It is. It is a lot. That's all the stuff about touring and being out and doing shows that I think most people kind of take for granted that it doesn't happen, that everything just aligns and everything just comes together. And if they see a band and the band is on fire and everything is together, I don't think people understand how rare that actually is.
Oh
That
yeah.
in almost every show, there's at least one or two things that go really sideways. And that's if you're in a band where everybody's reliable and everybody shows up and you're working with all other people that are at the same professional level than you are. That doesn't even account for the bands that I've been in and the times that I've shared stages with musicians who are just wholly unprofessional and have no idea about what it means to actually deliver a performance you give people their money's worth.
I mean, when you see a professional band like a stadium act, they're getting the best help, the best gear, you know. And
Yeah.
at our level, like a tribute band level, we don't always get the right sound, the right gear, the right
Yeah.
staff, the right amount of rest, or we got to jump through all these hoops. So it's very hard. And you're right.
Yeah.
If it's a great show, that's something we're celebrating. That's like a miracle you just witnessed.
Yeah.
More times
Yeah.
things don't go right. And that's more normal.
Yeah, it is. The normal is that something's going to go wrong, and the abnormal is that everything comes off perfect.
It kind of leads into the next question. Some of these things go wrong. Like, what's the most nervous you ever felt before going on a show? Can you remember one show particular where you were just kind of freaking out before going on because maybe something didn't go right or
Yeah.
emotions weren't there?
So, and I don't know if this is the same for other musicians that are either on the tribute scene or in national acts or just people that are in bar bands. Um, I have a much easier time going out and doing a show like what we did at Hard Rock Live that night in front of 5,000 people than going out and doing a show in front of a really small, intimate crowd, right? So there's been a few times that I've done actually, as even in the U2 tribute band, where we've been booked to do weddings. And I've either done track shows at a wedding where I just play a backing track and I sing over the topic because all they wanted to do was book a Bono impersonator for one song.
Yeah.
I've done it where it's been me and the guitarist who plays the edge, and it's just the two of us playing acoustic versions of songs. And then we've done a couple of weddings where it was the full band, even though we weren't the entertainment for the reception. We were just the people that were getting married were huge U2 fans, and they wanted us to come and just play like 5 songs of U2, and then they wanted to turn it over to a DJ.
Yeah.
And I think those probably are the events that I would get the most nervous about because I was always concerned about ruining someone's wedding, you know? Like, I mean, and
Responsibility, pressure, you know.
yeah, and doing different arrangements of the songs, right? Like the one singing a backing track, I always know I'm doing a version that's similar to what I do in either U2 Decades or U2 by UV. And I just strip out, the vocals from our recordings, and that's what I use as the backing track. But the acoustic stuff, it's so rare that we ever play just a straight up acoustic versions of anything. And, specifically with the band down in Florida, because I don't live down there, there's never rehearsal time, right? If we add new songs or if we do something that's not in our typical repertoire, we'll run those songs during sound check, and that's our rehearsal for it.
Yeah.
So it's not uncommon that we go out and we add new songs to our set list that we've only played together one time. And so those are the situations where, yeah, nerves can really get the best of me. But again, the biggest ones for me are those moments that people's entire marriage and the beginning of their life together starts with that event. And I don't want to be the person
No, yeah.
that's a stain on that,
Maybe because it feels more personal or intimate. Maybe they can see the whites of your eyes. They could talk to you, speak to
Yeah,
you.
because you're right there. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, when typically for those, there's not a lot of production values, right? You're set up in the corner of wherever the reception is going to be, right? There's a DJ booth that's, 20 feet away from you because they're going to be doing the rest of it. And it's really people are like standing there right in front of you. When you're doing the bride and groom's or the bride and father's first dance, and that's the song that you're doing because that's the one they want, a part of that is going to make their wedding video and they're going to watch it for the rest of their lives, right? So
Yeah.
the last thing that I want to do is blow a lyric or hit a froggy note during something like that. So yeah,
Yeah.
that those are high pressure for me.
Luckily, I only did, I think, one wedding, but it was just like that. It was me and the guitar player acoustic. Yeah. I
Yeah, it's a
mean,
different game altogether.
it was a little different. Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Um,
know I know musicians that's primarily what they do. They're either in wedding bands or they're in wedding string quartets or trios, like acoustic trios, and that's their bread and butter, and my hat's off to them because those are all like every gig they do is that kind of high pressure.
and someone might think, wow, 5,000 people. I couldn't do that. That's too big, and we were more comfortable doing that one. So it's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, because I think I guess because you're so isolated from any one individual in those crowds, and typically, I mean, for us specifically with the tribute scene, and again, the show at Hard Rock Live, or most of the bigger shows that we do, so many of the people that show up are such hardcore U2 fans, right?
Yeah.
That first of all, they're forgiving because they love the music, and that's really what they're there to see. They're there to hear their favorite songs. They're not necessarily there, I think, to see us. So they're forgiving when we make mistakes. So they're forgiving when something doesn't really go over the way that you think it's going to go over. But when there's a whole group of them and it's that big of a crowd, it's it mutes that response a little bit to the point where it's just a din of noise and people singing the songs with you, right? Where when it's just a group of say, 100 people for a wedding and they're all, 20 of them care about U2 at all, right? So they're really paying attention. Pretty much everybody else that comes to the wedding, they don't care about U2, right? It's really not their
True.
thing. And so, they if they hear a song that they recognize, they're like, "Oh yeah, that sounded pretty good," right? But the ones that really like U2, they're like staring right at you, and they're like, right in your
They're looking at
face.
their phones. You've lost them. They're just like, I don't know that song. It's
Yeah,
obscure.
yeah,
Man,
yeah, yeah.
I know that, man. Here's something interesting. While performing, have you ever had a security situation or a show had to be paused due to a wild fan?
Um, not not where the show had to necessarily be paused, although I mean, yeah, we did one show out in Denver where, and I couldn't believe this happened. We did a show out in Denver, and the venue made it very clear to us that we were not to have any fans up on stage, right? Because one of the people on this buyers group that was the promoter for the show, they know about U2, and they had said Bono will almost always bring somebody up on stage, right? And so they cleared it with us, and they said, listen, you cannot have anybody up on stage. The insurance for this venue doesn't cover that. It's not doable. You can't do it. That's all there is to it. So we were like, okay, yeah, no problem. And that's something that I do rarely anyways, right? And so we're doing this show, and all of a sudden, my sister and two of her girlfriends had gotten around to the side because they had passes to get into the backstage area. And they went around to the stage steps and they come running out onto the stage. And I hadn't even thought to say anything to her and them about the rule at this place. And they thought it would be something that would be really cool because that's kind of what they do when they go see bands, anyways. They try to always get backstage, they try to get on stage. That's who they are, right? And they just come running up there. And then all of a sudden, the front of house went down and the guy pulled down the whole mix and stopped. And I told them all, I said, I'm sorry, I can't have you up here. I'm gonna get in all kinds of trouble if you guys
That's
are
better
up
than
here.
like dangerous situations, like
Yeah,
someone's,
yeah,
life's
yeah.
at
There's
stake or something, you know?
never been anything dangerous. This was
Good.
just more embarrassing, right? Because
Yeah.
it turned out to be my family member.
That's pretty innocent though, but that's still a good story though.
Yeah, yeah. It definitely freaked me out because I was like, oh, well, I guess we'll never be asked back to this venue again. And we never were. That
I know
was
there's always that looming pressure of wanting to impress and get back in there and drawing
yeah,
well
because
and doing good. It's a lot going on, and we're going to get
yeah,
into a lot
because
of that
we were
stuff.
at that time we were trying to break into that sort of front range Colorado and Midwest market. And this was an opportunity for us to do that. And so, it was a ticketed event. We knew there was a chance we were going to maybe just break even on flights and accommodations and everything. And I lived in Denver for a lot of years. And so this was going back to Denver for me. So I had people from high school that I had invited who I was friends with on Facebook. So we ended up doing really well on the show, but our hope was that this was like one of many times of going back to
Right.
Denver with, the goal being like maybe twice a year to go back and do some of these front range mini tours out there. And that was our anchor show and that was our shot. And it just ended up not working out. Yeah, it was really unfortunate.
Have you ever had like any airplane drama or a broken down tire car trying to get to a gig where you got stuck or didn't make it?
Okay, so we did a show on Grand Cayman. This was a private event, and um, I was flying from New York directly to Grand Cayman, and the rest of the guys were flying from Florida to Grand Cayman. So we were coming in on different flights, and my flight landed at I think it was like 10 o'clock in the morning, the day before the show. And so I land, I get off my flight, I'm going through the line to customs. I get up to the guy. I was towards the back of the plane. So I was like, I think there were maybe 10 people behind me in this line. And there was three customs agents. So, typical turnstile, stanchions, and then they would break you off. So I go to the customs agent and he looks at my stuff and he asks me what I'm doing on Grand Cayman. And I said, well, I'm here doing a corporate event. I'm in a band and we're performing at so-and-so place. And he looks at my stuff and he goes, just 1 minute. And he goes back into the back office. And he comes back out like 5 minutes later and he goes, "What is your purpose for being in Grand Cayman?" And so I told him again. And he said, "Okay, I'm going to have to get my supervisor." And he goes back and he gets a supervisor. This goes on, no exaggeration. This goes on for 2.5 hours. And in the meantime, the other three guys from the band, their flight landed probably 45 minutes after mine did. Now, at this point, everybody from my flight is through customs, and there are no other people in customs because it's a small airport and there just aren't that many flights that come in and out every day. So the other guys, they come off of the plane, and one of them has 6 of his 8 guitars with him, and they're all stacked up on one of these carts, right? And he had started drinking when he got on the flight. And by the time they landed in Grand Cayman, he was out of his mind, right? So I'm standing in line at this customs guy, and he's going back and forth, and the supervisor and him keep going in the back office. They keep coming back out. They keep asking me the same questions, but asked in subtle, different ways. And these guys that had just gotten off of that flight, as they were coming through the line with all of these guitars, they knock the guitars over, right? Because they're just loaded. They're making a complete mess. And so I was telling the guy, I said, by the way, that's before that happened, I was telling the customs agent, I said, that's the band that I'm performing with. They came in on a different flight, which he said, well, that seems weird if you're in the same band. And I said, well, I live in New York. They live in Florida. We're meeting here to do the show. I'm still going back and forth with the customs agent guy, and these guys make a complete, not a mockery is the wrong word, but it's just like a conflagration. They're just like falling all over the place, knocking these guitars over. They got through customs before I did. And by the time I finally got through and they let me in, these guys were all standing on the other side of the, of the customs agents, and they're dying laughing, going, "What was going on? Like, what took you so long to get through? I mean, is there something we should know?" And I was like, "I don't know how you drunk bastards all got through customs faster than I did after what you did with knocking the guitars over and making all this noise and just, I mean, you out of your minds." So yeah, that was not that that was going to keep us from making it to the gig on time because we were there the day before. But if they decided for whatever reason not to let me in, yeah, then that gig would have not happened.
And people think and they ask us, well, gee, how hard is it to get 4 or 5 guys on stage and play some music? What's the big deal?
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know. Everything in the universe trying to stop it?
yeah, yeah. But the funny thing about it to me was that, here I am, just this like unassuming guy, right?
Yeah.
And and I was being honest with him about every one of my answers, when he asked me. And I thought when the other band members came through and knocked their stuff over, I thought if customs is giving me this hard of a time and I'm being really calm and I'm not drunk and I'm being honest about why I'm here, I thought this could end up derailing this whole show if they decide that they don't want to let these guys into the country because,
Yeah.
they're out of their minds. So yeah, it
God.
was it was funny
That's
in a sick kind of way.
that's too why I never fly in the day of a show. I always fly at least a day before because you never know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
Man,
it's not worth it.
here's something. Have you ever gotten hurt on stage or anyone in your band ever injured themselves while on stage?
Um, I I didn't get hurt on stage, but I got hurt on my way to the stage at one point, and I was walking in the backstage area, and there was like a flat dolly that had a couple of racks of gear on it, and there was just stuff all strewn all over the place in this backstage area. And I was trying to get through because I was going over to the staircase to go take the stage. I mean, it was
Yeah.
like right there before showtime. And there was this stack of stuff there, and there was one guy trying to move it all. And I was like, well, let me just give you a hand. And if you don't mind, I'll help push some of this stuff because I got to get through here. And he was like, no, that's fine. That's fine. So we're like rushing. So I'm pushing this flat dolly with these racks on it. And the front wheels hit this groove in the concrete where it was not level and it stopped the dolly. And I kicked it with my shin, like it turned up like this and like kind of flipped up like that. So the part of the wood dolly was sticking out past the rack and it bashed into my shin and it hurt so bad. And my legs swelled up to the point where you could see it swollen underneath my pants. It was like this, like how sometimes you get a bruise and it just like initially it just turns into like this big round lump.
Yeah.
Well, it was like this big round lump right above my boot level
Yeah.
and sticking out. And I mean, I could see it bulging at the front of my pants and,
Yeah.
and it hurt so bad.
Of course. That's a
And
big stinger.
yeah, it was a big stinger. And then it cut it a little bit because I was moving. I was booking with this thing to try to get it out of the way.
And
And
you're
it was like,
literally walking onto the stage now at this point?
and I did that and I kicked it with my shin and had to go get past that and get around to the set of stairs that were on that side of the stage that I was supposed to come up on. And yeah, I was going onto the stage like within a minute or two of that. It was like it was time.
And the audience has no idea. They're just like, well, I hope this band's good, and I hope they bring
Yeah.
their A game tonight. We're waiting. And they
Yeah.
don't know what you're going through back there. It's like, if you would have
Yeah.
known what just happened to me a minute
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah. Yeah. That one was that hurt. Because it was like right, that bony part of your shin where there's no
Yeah.
skin and yeah.
Oh, no. I slammed my shin on a monitor one time, and I was hopping around like a bunny
Oh
doing a
yeah.
song.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, I've been fortunate enough that I don't think I've ever had anything other than that, maybe like a hangnail getting caught on a guitar string or something like that and my finger bleeding. But nothing like been fortunate. I've never fallen off a stage or anything like that. I've never gotten seriously hurt. And I don't think that I've ever been on a stage with anybody that took like a serious tumble, which
I've had some
which is
bad
great.
cramps before, like a foot cramp or a hamstring pull or something. I've had some of those. Those are
Yeah, yeah,
painful.
yeah,
You got to
yeah.
hop around, jump around, and they think, wow, he's really going at it. Look at him rocking. And I'm trying to loosen this cramp in my foot. It's
Yeah,
embarrassing.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, man. Have you ever had any crazy weather delays, like lightning, tornado,
Oh
snow,
yeah.
maybe?
Yeah, we were doing a show at PGA National golf course one year, and we were on a stage that they had put out on. I think we were right by the ninth hole, so we were kind of like entertainment for people that were following this golf match that was going on that day, and I think we got through maybe 6 songs and we could see it coming, like dark, dark clouds and lightning. And, they were on the loudspeakers every once in a while saying, we're still good to go. We're not sure we're going to be canceling or asking everybody to get inside. And I think we got through about 6 songs and then they announced it and they just said, nope, everybody's gotta get off of the course. This is entirely too dangerous. And it ended up raining, I think, for like an hour and 15 minutes. We ended up not doing any more of the show because pretty much the whole thing, I mean, it was like a solid downpour and it was heavy lightning. That happened to us at that. And then it happened to us one year at John Martin's, which we used to do on St. Patrick's Day every year in Coral Gables. And I think the last year that we did John Martin's, it 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 rained really, really hard to the point where the rain was getting onto the stage and the sound production company just called it and said, uh, you know, I got to power down because it's too dangerous for these guys.
You got to worry about people's safety. And then, like, your
Yeah.
equipment might get damaged too, man. You might get, like,
Yeah.
water in your gear and, ruin your equipment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Man, what's the longest you've ever driven to or from a show in the same day?
Um, well, so to a show, this wasn't such a bad drive, but I was doing a show in New Jersey with my U2 tribute band that was up here. At the time, it was called Beautiful Day. And So it was a summer concert um, somewhere in a park, and there wasn't budget for accommodations. And the other guys that I worked with in that band all lived in New Jersey. So for them, it wasn't a far drive. So I was the only one that was driving. So I got there, we did the show. I was on my way back to Long Island after that show. And I don't know if you recall the New Jersey traffic study that was done by Chris Christie's administration.
Personally, no, I don't recall.
Okay, so because the mayor of Fort Lee, New Jersey was a Barack Obama supporter, Chris Christie's administration decided to they came that the mayor came out and said something that was supportive of Barack Obama's administration. And so Chris Christie's administration decided they were going to take revenge on the city of Fort Lee. Fort Lee sits right at the George Washington Bridge. So to get from New Jersey onto, over the Hudson River onto New York, you have to go over the George Washington Bridge. It's like 18 lanes of toll booths at that time because it was before electronic tolls. And it doesn't really matter what time of day it is, there's always traffic. There's always just a lot of traffic. It's the Northeast primary corridor, right? So I get about, I don't know, maybe a mile from the GWB, and traffic is just at a standstill. And I sat there from, I think we finished the show at 9:30 p.m. We loaded out. I was in my car and I had gotten to that point by maybe 12:30, 12:45. And I didn't finally get past the George Washington Bridge until 5:30, 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning. I mean, we literally sat there. They shut down all of the lanes but one. And it was one at the toll booth. And there was nobody there directing traffic. And it was just backed up. I mean, it I was a mile from the bridge. There was no place for me to turn around. At that point, it's like a 4-lane highway. And then it widens out as you come up to the bridge approach. And so I wouldn't say it's actually driving, but I was in my car with really no place else to go because you're on a highway. It's not like you could leave your car and go get out and go walk someplace to use the bathroom or get something to drink or anything like that. But I sat there literally until about 5:30 in the morning. And it was because of what Chris Christie's, a couple of people in his administration did to politically give some payback to this mayor of uh, of that town.
That sounds like such a nightmare. Like it freaks me out just hearing about it. That's like a fear of mine. Like, did you not have like any water or food on you at all?
I think
Anything?
I didn't have any food. I always keep like a bottle of water,
Me
in my
too.
car. Um, and so I probably had like, yeah, maybe 3/4 of a bottle of, like Poland Springs, one of those bigger ones. So I was fine with that. But it was just the sitting there and not knowing. And we were getting out of our car. People like, what's going on? Does anybody know what's going on? Nobody could find out anything because there was no accident report. There were no sirens. There was no police presence that
Any
showed
cell
up.
phones at the time? Like smartphones?
Yeah, yeah, I had a cell phone, but you couldn't find anything on it. There was like nothing other than, eventually the following day was when there was like this uproar. And then eventually, within a couple of days, it came out that they had said that they were doing a traffic study. Turned out it wasn't a traffic study. They literally just shut down the toll booths in order to create this chaos in this town so that the mayor would end up supposedly having repercussions from that.
And you
So it
get
was a
stuck in that.
political, it's a
Yeah.
political stunt, and two people from Chris Christie's administration had to resign
Yeah. That's
ultimately.
insane.
But it took like 2 years for them to do the investigation and for the truth to come out that it wasn't a traffic study. It was really all just political retribution. Yeah.
Wrong place, wrong time on that gig.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah, and there were other ways that I could have gone home. Like I could have gone south and gone over Staten Island and two other bridges that get to Long Island. But I just was like, well, I'm up here
Yeah,
in
you didn't
North New
know.
Jersey anyways. I might as well take the shortest route,
Sure, as you
not
do.
knowing. Because at the time when I was driving up there, like I had GPS on my car, like I had a GPS system in my car, and it wasn't saying that route was going to take me that many hours
Yeah,
because
just
they
find me the fastest way home. That's all.
yeah, they
Yeah.
literally just shut it down at like midnight or something like that, or at 11:30, and by the time I got within a mile of it, it was backed up, and it was backed up even all the way behind me because there was a lot of traffic still. It was a weekend. It was like, I think it was a Saturday. The show was on a Saturday, so I was driving home on a Saturday, or it might even have been a Friday. I'm not even sure. I don't remember now at this point, but yeah, that was crazy.
Have you ever had to change plans last minute before a show? Maybe someone didn't make it or something broke that had to alter your show?
Um, so yeah, there's been a couple of times that we've ended up having to do most of our show either with different backing tracks than what we're used to. Like when I first joined the band down in Florida, they used to run their backing tracks on an iPod. And when I joined the band and started bringing the video element to the show, we started running the backing tracks on a laptop. And so I had my laptop set up, but I traveled with it. I would bring it back to New York with me to edit the videos and to do all of that kind of stuff and to work on the backing tracks. And I got down to New York or to Florida one time, and I opened up my suitcase and I pulled out my MacBook Pro, and it was not the MacBook Pro that had the YouTube by UV show on it. It was my other MacBook Pro that looks exactly the same that I used for my video production company at home. I had none of the files. So we had to go back. And at this point, we had been using my MacBook and doing the backing tracks on a laptop for probably 3, maybe 4 years at this point. So everybody was full on like, this is how we do our show.
This is how we do the show. This is the way it's rehearsed.
Yeah, this is the
Yeah.
way it's rehearsed. All of the clicks, and in our backing tracks, we have a metronome, but then we also have some audible prompts that will do a countdown that'll say verse two, 3, 4. So in some of these songs, like in U2, some of the intros are really long, right?
Yeah.
And they're, 64 measures of just intro buildup before the actual song starts. And so instead of everybody having to count 64 measures while this loop is playing and while this backing track is playing and nobody else is doing much of anything, we just started putting in audible prompts so that if so that we could just listen to those and then we'd get our cue and it would be like, verse 1 in 30 seconds or whatever the timing was, and then the countdown directly with the click. So that was all on the laptop. None of that information was on the files that were on the iPad or the iPod that they had used. And they just happened to have that iPod with them as like a backup worst case scenario. So we ended up having to do that show with that, which means we didn't have the video element, which changed that whole thing because it was a video screen that
Right.
just had static image on it for the whole show. And people that knew our show from seeing it with the video element before were like, what happened with the videos? Right. And so we kind of had to explain away a little bit that my dumbass showed up with the wrong computer.
Literally anything can happen, and it does, and it will,
Yeah.
you know?
That's a self-inflicted wound that was a little bit less funny to me than some of the other stuff, but
We're only human, man. It's so much that they ask of us sometimes,
yeah,
and you do 9 things right, but that 10th thing you miss, it's like, what happened? You
yeah,
know?
yeah.
What are some things you wish people understood about musicians and performers?
Um, I get a lot of people who see our show and see the multimedia element that we bring, and the band has been performing together with various lineups, but ultimately like really a matter of like 7 people completely from the different versions of U2 by UV that have been around. It's been 18 years now. And so that we put an awful lot of time and effort into trying to bring people, a show that harkens as much to a U2 show as possible, obviously with the limited budgets that we have and the fact that I do everything myself, right? But I get a lot of people who assume when they see our show that we must be touring constantly and that we're just out from one date in South Florida to where are you guys going next? And when I tell them I'm going home, and they go, "Oh, you mean so is the tour over?" And a lot of times I would tell them, "Well, it's March. We have 3 shows down here for March, or I've got one show in New York, and I've got 2 shows down here in Florida, and then we don't have anything again on our calendar until April or May." And a lot of people are surprised by that because they think that we must do this full time. And so I have that a lot of times from people. And I also have people all the time who say, well, you must have met U2 by now. I mean, you must be friends with those guys. And the answer to that is no, I have not ever personally met any of them other than briefly in a line outside of one of their concerts where I just happened to get to say hi, to the Edge. And that was really it. Um, but yeah, I have never had the opportunity of actually meeting any of these guys in any real meaningful way.
It's like we're just average people, man. We've got good days, bad days. We don't always get the rock star treatment. Sometimes we're roughing it.
Yeah, yeah, we usually don't get the rock star
Yeah.
treatment.
Do you have any pre-show rituals or even post-show rituals?
Um, no, not really. I mean, there's so much like the U2 stuff that I do right now, I've been doing for so long that we've really kind of tweaked the whole thing, right? When for a while there, when I was going down to Florida, I was staying at the guitarist's house. And and that was great. I mean, that worked out really well for us. Um, but with the way the band is set up now, the guitarist doesn't live in South Florida either. So him and I both travel down there for shows. And neither of the other 2 guys really have room in their house to accommodate either of us. So we're always at different hotels because we book our travel ourselves. So I'll book a hotel that I've got points with, and Jeff will book a hotel that he's got that he likes to go to and that he's got incentives. And we don't ever show up in the same flight because he flies from Kentucky, I fly from New York. So most of the time we just meet at load in and sound check. And that's the first time that we see each other when we're down to do some of these shows.
Oh yeah. Did it go?
The hair down. Oftentimes, if it's a one-off, like has been increasingly the case down there, um, I'll either fly out if it's a daytime show, like some of the St. Patrick's Day festivals are. I fly out that night, and so after we're done with the show, I'm cramming to get my stage gear packed up, get in my rental car, and make it to the airport before boarding closes on my flight.
And that
And
can
then
be
if it's not
stressful too.
that, then
You're
it's
trying to
usually the
make a
next.
deadline and you just got this crazy high of being on stage.
Yeah, and that can be really bizarre. That whole like when they're bigger shows where the crowd is just like insane, and you go from that to getting in a car and going to an airport and obviously not being recognized by anybody, and it's a complete opposite sort of way of being in society, like when you're on stage and you're in front of a bunch of people who love the music that you play and who are sharing their passion with you too, with us, it gets you into this mindset where you can lose yourself a little bit if you're not careful. Like, I have to remind myself all the time, this is nothing to do with me. This is all about people and the music that they love and the memories that they have from that music. And they're generous enough to share that passion with us, which is really cool. But then you go from that to being alone in a rental car driving to an airport to catch a flight that isn't going to get home until 1 o'clock in the morning or 1:30, and then I'm going to drive an hour and a half from the airport to get to my place because I live far out on Long Island. That quiet time directly following that ecstatic, crazy crowd can really mess with your head.
It's chaotic and loud, and it goes to silent, and you're just
Dead
left with the
silence.
humming in your ear.
Yeah, dead silence.
Yeah.
And and again, the not that I think that it has anything to do with me. It's really people, buying into this notion that I'm portraying Bono. For the U2 fanatics that come to shows all the time and who know every word and sing every song and who are so gracious in, like I said, sharing their passion with that music with a guy like me, it's a really, really cool thing, but it's just so opposite from when you're just another guy standing in line at the airport getting through security, you know,
Yeah. And then you're at the airport McDonald's waiting in line just like everybody else, and you gotta just
just
like
like
be normal.
everybody else. Yeah. Yeah.
What
It's
are what are some of the most interesting accommodations you've ever gotten for a gig, whether it was maybe food, hotel, gifts, special access, tickets, prize?
Okay, so I'll go deep in the well of my music experience and touring. I was in a cover band in Colorado where we played the Denver circuit, which consisted of probably 10 locations, 10 venues that were really good to the bands that played there. And at that time in Denver, the music scene was pretty much a weekly residence type of music scene. So if you were booked at a club in Denver, you were typically there from either Tuesday or Wednesday night, where you would loan it and do your sound check, and you would play through Saturday or Sunday night, and you would play the same venue every night. And a lot of these venues had different themed nights, right? So they would draw different crowds. So Wednesday was usually ladies' night. Thursday was a wet t-shirt contest. Friday was just, you know, dollar drafts or whatever, because they could always get people in on Fridays and Saturdays. So they didn't need to do anything really special. But to get people in there Wednesday and Thursday, they had needed to have these special events radio stations would sponsor. So we would do that Denver circuit, but then we would go and we would do the circuit in the ski towns that are outside of Denver. So the Rocky Mountain Range. So you're talking about Wyoming, Utah, and Colorado. And the agents that booked us on these circuits, they had relationships with all these ski areas and the venues that were at these ski areas. So we would go to these places and we would play. And we used to play this place called well, I won't say the name of it, but we would play this place in Breckenridge, Colorado, that was one of the oldest honky tonk bars in Breckenridge, Colorado. The clientele was very rock oriented. And that band that I joined, by the time I was invited to come into that band, they had stopped doing a lot of the 80s and 70s hard rock because the guitar players just he couldn't deal with it anymore. He was just like, I can't deal with the noise. So we started doing a lot of classic new wave. So we were doing U2, In Excess, Simple Minds, some synth pop, Depeche Mode, and that kind of stuff. But he didn't want to. That venue had booked him for so many years as a rock band that he didn't want to move the band over to the other venue in Breckenridge that was more appropriate for the kind of music that we did, because he wanted to stay loyal to this guy who had been booking him for like the last 6 years with his rock band. So we would go to this place and we would play it for a week, usually twice during the ski season and then twice over the summer. And we would go there during the ski season and it was filled with all of the locals from Breckenridge. It wasn't the tourists. They didn't go to this place because it was a dive bar, hole in the wall, had a nice stage, but we would get stuff thrown at us in that place because they hated the kind of music that we played. And I mean hated it, right? And the guy that owned the place and that were, his bartending staff, they kept bringing us back because they said, we like the break from every band that is coming in here playing Whitesnake and Led Zeppelin and all that stuff. We like that you guys are doing different stuff. And we added a couple of things into our set. Like we did, like a Robert Plant song. We did, we did Long Cold Woman in a Black Dress, that classic Hollies tune. We did some stuff that was classic rock
Try to
still, but it
cater to
just,
that audience a little bit.
yeah, well, and we did it because we liked the material as well, but we weren't going to hang our hats on Motley Crue and all of that other stuff that was famous during that part of the 80s, right? And so the people that would come in there, they didn't care if we threw in Paranoid by Black Sabbath. They were just like, that's not enough. Like they like that song, but then we would go from that into like What I Like About You. And they would, they'd start throwing shooting their beer caps at us like this. Like not really super overtly mean stuff, although I did have a beer bottle go past my head one time, and that guy got kicked out.
Good.
Um, but it was, you know, so we would go there and we would do that. The accommodations at that venue were in the basement of the guy who owned the bar. And it was a mountain house. It was like it was Breckenridge is, it's a rural tourist attraction, but for the people that live there all year round, it's mountain country. And so that house that we stayed in, those accommodations, the last time that we went there had no hot water, and we were there for a week. So there was no hot water and no heat. And this was in probably the beginning of February, the height of ski season.
Right.
And it was so cold. And we weren't making enough money at that place to afford to rent accommodations. There was no Airbnb then. And hotels were all filled up because it was, height of ski season, and you just couldn't get stuff
Yikes.
unless you booked in advance. And even at that, the budget was not the kind of budget that would afford. It was great pay for a band as long as you were self-contained. We were a 5-piece with sound production. So it's not like we could just go rent some other motel or something like that, because we would have ended up spending all of the money that we made
Right. Yeah.
just for the accommodation. So we just toughed it out, and we brought space heaters, little tiny. I finally went out to like a Target or something like that and bought a space heater. So at least at night I could sleep. And we took cold showers for the entire week, and it was brutal.
Sometimes I get so anxious when I hear the term band house. Yeah, you guys are gonna be staying at the band house that
Yeah.
weekend.
Yeah. So, because some of them are really sketchy.
Yeah, I'd say most are. It's
Most,
called
yeah,
band house.
yeah.
Man.
Most of the time we get hotel accommodations.
Yes.
And we got to a point where we just started putting that we just wanted to buy out a flat dollar amount buyout for the venues that we needed to travel to, because so many times we would get booked into really rat's nest motels
Right. Yeah. Us too. Yeah.
that, and then we would check out the rates and they would tell us, oh yeah, it's $127 a night. And it's like, for $127 a night, I can stay in a Holiday Inn Express, which I know at least is going to be clean.
Oh, dude, we always stay at Holiday Inn Express. Like
There,
we look for it. I'm a member.
me too. It's a great chain, and it's affordable, and most of them are decent, right? I've been in a few that were not great,
Right.
but you know, I mean, nothing like a Motel 6. Like we put in our contracts, no La Quinta, no Motel 6, and nothing below a certain standard.
I mean,
But
I'd rather
people,
just book the hotel myself so I can do the reviews. I can look at it.
yep, us too.
When you're on the road or doing a show, other than your gear, what are some of your must-have items that you always bring with you?
Um, I don't know. It's pretty much just gear. I mean, I always bring my laptop with me, to use for the show. Um, it's hard for me sometimes in the wintertime to pack to go to Florida, because I try to keep everything as contained as I can. I always gate check my guitar because I don't want to run it through just regular TSA,
Right.
right? I made that mistake one time and I got it back and the case was demolished. Luckily,
Jeez.
the guitar was fine, but the case was demolished. So I figure at least I'm eliminating some potential for them to throw it around if I gate check it. and they've still bashed it up, several times. But I try to keep myself to just one suitcase that I can fit in an overhead that will have all of my stage wear, right? And so if I'm going out for 3 or 4 dates, that's, 3 or 4 different pairs of pants, pair of boots, a couple of different jackets, shirts. A lot of times that takes up that in addition to my guitar processor that has to go in there and my laptop has to go in there. That leaves me little room for other clothes. So I'm always like trying to figure out what's the t-shirt that how can I fit as many of these t-shirts in here and these shorts and a pair of flip-flops? Because if I'm going to be in Florida, that's all I need during the day, right? But then I always have to have and something so that when I come back, I can at the airport either in Florida before I get on the flight or when I get off the flight before I go out to my car and it's like 38 degrees or 32 degrees, I got to have a jacket or something that I can put on and long pants and a long sleeve shirt. Otherwise I get to my car and I'm freezing my ass off halfway home.
Some people don't understand. Sometimes you go to these venues and there's like no water, there's no food,
Yeah.
and it's like there's nowhere to go. I always bring snacks, waters, Gatorade, because sometimes they don't give you anything.
Yeah. Yeah. We dealt with one agent who consistently so I have celiac sprue. I don't know if you know what that is. That's the gluten intolerance. So I can't eat gluten. Um, and we had one agent who booked us consistently on shows where the only food that the band ever got was pizza. And so anytime we were doing a show that agent was booked it, I knew I would have to bring something that I could eat. And so on shows like that, yeah, I would have to stop and get something and make sure that I took care of myself because it just wasn't an option. It was like, no, it's either pizza or it's nothing. I mean, I guess we could do ziti. It's like that's the same.
Personally, I'm lactose intolerant, so pizza's no
So
go for me too.
yeah, exactly. So
And you're right, it's always pizza.
yeah, and I can't even, yeah, as you know, so many times it's weird because so I work in film production as my day job as well. And I can't even tell you how many times I've been on film shoots where we've had to tell the line producer or the supervising producer, pizza is not a crew meal. That doesn't qualify. No, we can't go work on your project and be on set for 16 hours a day and have you have a bunch of Dominoes delivered at dinner time and have that be enough. We need actual food that is going to provide us with energy
Some
through,
protein, man.
yeah, something that's going to sustain us because a lot of times we get to these places and we do shows and our load in and sound check is at 11 o'clock in the morning, right? And the show doesn't start until 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And we've got the whole day that we're either hanging out in our hotel room or hanging out at the venue or going and trying to fit in something in the area. If it's an area we've not been before, we try to see some stuff. Like when we went to Pearl Harbor, our schedule was actually pretty good. We had 3 days on the island. So the day before, the day of the show, and then the day after, which was great because we had an opportunity to to see some of Hawaii. We got to go to the beach. I did some surfing the day
Nice.
before. That was one thing I did. I was surfing the day before that show, and I had never surfed in Hawaii before. And I was on my board, and I didn't understand that even on the sandy breaks, underneath the sand are a lot of reefs. And I was riding this wave and I was not that far from the shore. The water had gotten to the point where it was only like 3 feet deep. And I was like, all right, I'm going to just jump off the board here and I'll just walk it up. Right. And I jumped off and there was maybe 3 inches of sand or something like that. And then there was a coral reef underneath that or something sharp. And I cut the bottom of my toe
Wow.
and it bled and bled and bled. And I had to wrap it up. And so I did that show the next day with my with my big toe like wrapped in so much gauze and bandages that I jammed into my boot. And by the time I finished the show and we got back to our rooms that night, I took my boot off and it was just like there was so much blood in there. But that was again a self-inflicted wound because I just wasn't paying attention to what I was doing. And
It's so tough as a musician because there's on the one hand, it's the show must go on. You push through it. Come on. Versus, is it really the right thing to do this show? deathly ill, and maybe my voice isn't going to sound good tonight. Are people going to be upset with me if I'm croaking the whole night? Which
Yeah.
one is it? What's right, what's wrong?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
What are
It's
some
a,
of the most unusual places you performed at?
um, so I did a solo Bono appearance at the Waldorf Astoria in Manhattan. And the guy that booked me to do it, he booked me through, I have an agent that I work with that just books me on solo Bono appearances. A lot of times it's either as an extra on someone's video or TV shoot. Sometimes it's performing for, I've performed at a bar mitzvah for a bunch of 13-year-old kids, just me, my guitar, and backing tracks. And then this particular one was at the Waldorf Astoria, and the guy was and his girlfriend were from, I think they were from Panama, either Panama or it was one of the Central American countries. I think it was Panama. Anyways, they were huge U2 fans, and he wanted to have me. He was staying in this hotel with his wife. He was planning on proposing, not his wife, his girlfriend. He was planning on proposing to her. And he set it up where they got to the hotel. He connected with me. We were texting each other. He gave me the engagement ring, and he had me set up in a banquet room. So it's like one of these big, huge hotel banquet rooms.
Okay.
And I was by myself with my laptop and a small PA system that I had brought. And we placed one light right above my head, and it was on a circle on a floor, and it was all the way up in the ceiling. So it was just this one cone of light. And I was in there, and he wanted me to sing All I Want Is You. And when I was done singing All I Want Is You, he wanted me to walk up to her and give her the ring in the box. And then he was going to ask her to marry him.
Oh boy.
And so I was set up and I was doing this. And he went back to his room, and he said his whole shtick or his whole thing with her was that he said, "Hey, you know what? I was just walking through the lobby, and I just saw Bono walking into this banquet room. And I just told him you're a huge fan. I asked him if he would mind if I bring you down so that you can meet him. And he said, yeah. And so he brought her down, brought her into this banquet room. I'm standing there, right? I start the track. I start singing With or Without You. I mean, not With or Without You. All I Want Is You. And they're probably 30 feet away from me, standing by the doorway, just in this banquet room. And she didn't want to come any closer. He was like, come on, come on. And she was like, no, 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 no. And they're looking at me, and I'm doing the song. And I notice about halfway through the song, she whispers something in his ear. And he looks at her and he goes, and he nods, right? So I finish the song. I walk up. I give her the little thing with the ring in it. I walk away. He asks her to marry him. There's another guy from the hotel who was standing there with a couple of glasses of champagne. He gives them the champagne. They do their toast. So now we're talking after this is done. And I said, so I noticed about halfway through the song, you said something to Ernesto. And I said, and I was wondering what that was. And she said, oh, I was telling him that I really thought that was Bono, but then I realized, no, you're too skinny to be Bono. I thought,
People.
okay, that's a compliment, but I hope nobody ever hears you say that. I hope Bono never hears you say that. But that was probably the most unique and strangest experience that had ever had doing this kind of stuff.
We did a nudist resort a couple times. We did a festival with about 300 naked people dancing.
Oh my gosh.
It's
That
like a fenced off community.
that must have been insane.
And not everybody looks so great as you can imagine, you know? There's a lot of
Yeah,
bouncing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
We
that's
also played a bris. That was pretty random.
a bris.
A bris, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's different. Yeah. A bar mitzvah was that was an interesting one for me. I really didn't know what to expect. I thought that the parents of this kid were U2 fans, and they thought it would be funny
Oh
to
yeah.
have some Bono impersonators show up. And I was honestly shocked that these kids, there was probably 30 of them, and there were all the rest of the family was all there. But there were 30 kids that sat on the dance floor, which was right in front of where I had set up next to the DJ booth. And I was scheduled to do 30 minutes. So I did 5 songs and then photo opportunities, right?
Yeah.
And so I did my show and I was just standing there and I said, so if anybody would like to do photos, that's fine too. And so all these kids got up, probably of the 30 of them, maybe 10 really weren't interested. Like they probably never heard who Bono was. They have
Sure.
no idea,
Yeah.
right? But the kid whose bar mitzvah it was came over and he was with probably 4 or 5 of his, I guess, closest friends. And they're standing there and his friend keeps nudging him and going, ask him, ask him, ask him. And he finally goes, I said, you can ask me anything you want. And he says, are you the real Bono? And I took my glasses and I was wearing it was right around Innocence and Experience. So I had on they're not Ray-Bans, but they look like Ray-Bans. They were the full mirrored blue glasses that he wore on the Innocence and Experience tour. And so I had those on, so you couldn't see my eyes at all. And so I took the glasses and I lifted them up and I said, no, I'm a Bono impersonator. And the kid goes, oh yeah, without your glasses, you kind of don't even really look like him.
Gee. Thanks, kid.
But they were the nicest kids. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, they, like probably 20 of them were like, yeah, I definitely want to get a picture. My dad loves you too. He's going to be so stoked when he sees the picture. And they were, honestly, these kids were one of the kindest audiences that was in a small environment like
Yeah.
that I ever performed. They were ecstatic after every song. They made a lot of noise. They were hooting and
Nice.
hollering, and they were the most polite kids when all was said and done. It was really a great experience for me. It was really cool.
What's the biggest crowd you've ever performed for?
Probably when we did so in U2 decade or U2 by UV, it would have been when we played at the Panthers Arena in Tampa.
I saw that.
You were
I wasn't
there.
there. I saw it online, YouTube.
Okay.
Well, you see,
Yeah,
I'm a
that
big
was
Panther fan right behind you there.
yeah, I see that. Yeah. So that was the biggest crowd that we played for, but that crowd wasn't there to see us,
Right.
right? Like, so I would say probably the biggest crowd where we were the draw would have been probably, I would say probably the Hard Rock Live the night before the Joshua Tree 2017 tour is that's definitely the largest crowd that we ever had that was for an event that we were the central
Right. The
focus,
main focus. Yeah.
the main focus. Yeah, we'd done other larger things like the Fort Lauderdale St. Patrick's Day Parade and Festival. We did that. That always drew in the square or in the park where that was being held at the time. There were probably when our show would go off, there were probably 10, maybe 12,000 people that were in that area. Not all
Nice.
of them paying attention to us, obviously, because some people hate you too. Um, so large crowds, but not crowds there to see us.
So you'd say like 12,000 maybe
I
might
would
have
say
seen you?
maybe 12,000, yeah, would be,
Very
largest,
cool.
which is big. I mean, that's,
Oh yeah.
even at Hard Rock, which I think they told us was 5,600 people is what they told us they logged coming into Hard Rock that night. And you know, that was 5,600 hardcore U2 fans, almost all of who were going to see U2 the next night, and a measurable percentage that had come to South Florida just to see U2 and happened to be there the night before and could catch us for free.
It really is perfect planning when you think about it. That was a great opportunity there, That
It was such
really
a great
made sense.
opportunity for us. And again, I can't, I can't express how grateful we were to Hard Rock to put that on for us and to make it a free event and to do the production at the level that they did the production, and for them to advertise it the way that they did was really just such a humbling and great experience for us. And that crowd was that gave me the greatest sense of feeling like I was in something really special, because that night was so special for us because everybody knew every single song and sang it out loud.
There's nothing better. That's the best. When they're singing
They're
it back
just,
to you, that's the best.
yeah, it is the best. And, like I was only using in-ears intermittently at that time. I was still basically singing from wedges on the stage, which I prefer because I like to hear the crowd noise,
Me
and
too, man.
in-ears make me feel too isolated. But I was using one in-ear just for click track and my voice, just so that I could boost that a little bit if I needed to on some of the quieter passages for the songs. But people were singing so loud that night that I could hear them as loud as I could hear my monitor. And that is pretty rare as well.
Yeah.
Like usually you can hear people if there's a few hundred singing, but this was the entire crowd singing almost every song, and it was epic.
You think to yourself, wow, this is like the real thing for a second. I got a taste of like the real thing. This is
That's
kind of what
how
it
it
feels like
felt.
to be Bono, you know?
Yeah. That is it definitely felt like
A
that,
little
you
taste.
know?
It's a beautiful
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel really fortunate to have been able to spend the last 18 years in a couple of really meaningful U2 tribute bands that have gained respect from U2 fans. That's for me, that's the thing, is that, like it kind of, for as long as I've been a musician, people have told me, "Oh, you look and you sound just like Bono." I had no idea what a U2 tribute band was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
This was completely foreign to me. I At the time that I started getting back into music, my wife and I had put out a couple of CDs of original music. We did some touring. We did some stuff in our band together. We moved back here to New York so we could be closer to her family because our son was young. And, we had kind of realized we weren't going to become rock stars, and this dream wasn't going to happen for us on our own. So we were hanging out one day and she said, you should just find a fun band to be in and just play out, do some gigs and have a good time. So I put an ad on Craigslist and I listed U2 as one of my influences. And some guy contacted me from New Jersey, and he said, yeah, I saw your ad and I noticed that you listed U2 as one of your influences. And I said, yeah. And he said, by any chance, can you sing like Bono? And I said, well, yeah, that's what I've been told my whole career, is that I sound just like Bono. And I said, and incidentally, when I put on glasses, people have told me I look like him too. And he said, well, I'm in a U2 tribute band and we've got a show coming up in a couple of weeks and our singer is missing in action. We can't get him to respond to us.
Wow.
And do you think you could do a U2 tribute show in 2 weeks? And I was like, what is a U2 tribute show? And he said, we're a U2 tribute band. There's U2 tribute bands all over the country. And we go out and we try to look and sound just like U2. And I was like, I had no idea that existed. I didn't realize that that was a thing. And so I started looking it up and I started seeing all these U2 tribute bands all over the place. And I was like, I said, yeah, I could do that gig. So I went and auditioned with them, and they were looking at me and they were like, so you're not on a U2 tribute band now? And I was like, no, I didn't know there was such a thing as a U2 tribute band. And they were like, well, you could be working all over the place if you wanted to, because you sound exactly like Bono. And they said, and yeah, with your glasses on, you look the part. And so I crammed a bunch of U2 songs. I've always liked U2. I've always
Yep.
been a fan. So we picked a set list of songs that I either knew well enough that I could just brush up on them and that they also knew. And we cobbled together, 90 minutes of U2 material. And I went and did the show for them. And I had a blast. I had a great time. Lo and behold, their other vocalist zombied up like 2 months later or something like that. And they decided he wanted his job back. And we didn't have anything else on the calendar except for one show. And so I, they were like, well, he kind of wants to come back. He kind of helped us found the band. And I was like, all right, fine. So I took one of the videos that someone shot at that show, and I put it on MySpace, and I emailed the link to every U2 tribute band that I could find and said, if you're ever looking for a fill-in Bono, let me know. And I started looking for players to form my own U2 tribute band. And that was how I met the guys down in Florida.
That's a really
Was
unique way to getting into it because most guys are putting out saying, "Hey, I want to do this tribute band.
yeah,
Find me a band." You had an interesting way of getting into it.
totally stumbled into it, not even really understanding what it was going to do for me in my overall career as a musician. I mean, it's the most consistent gig that I've done throughout my whole year has been these last 18 years with U2 by UV.
I got a couple here left before we wrap it up.
Okay.
Is there a non-traditional venue or location you'd love to have a concert at, like somewhere that you wouldn't normally play a concert at? Like a random spot?
Yeah, I mean, well, I guess it's not really, it's not even so much random now, but I think it's in Utah. There is a museum in Utah that bought one of the claws from the 360 tour and they put it up and they put a concrete round circular platform stage underneath the center of it. And they just bought it because the guy that is the owner of this event space or whatever it is was a huge U2 fan
Yeah.
and loved the 360 tour and found out that U2 was selling both of the claws and he bought one and put it up. So, and I know they've done some U2 tribute shows there. I think with some of the East or West Coast U2 tribute bands, I think maybe Elevation, I think maybe did a show there and maybe Hollywood U2. And so yeah, if I had a goal or a dream, there would be two places. I would love to play Red Rocks and I would
Oh,
love to play that place there.
Red Rocks is beautiful, man. That is great.
Yeah. And I used to go to Red Rocks when I was in high school. I used to not play music. This was before I was a musician because I went to high school in Denver. And Red Rocks was where we used to go hang out on
Yeah,
weekends.
you
And
can.
when there
It's like a
was,
tourist attraction.
we'd go climbing in all the caves back when you could still do that. You can't do that anymore because they blocked all the access to anything that you used to be able to climb. And so it was always a dream of mine to perform at Red Rocks when I did become a musician. And yeah, that would be that. I've seen so many concerts there. I had a ticket to go see Under a Blood Red Sky, and I was working at a Pizza Hut at the time, and I was forming a labor union at the Pizza Hut, and I was the president of the Pizza Hut employee committee, and I couldn't get anybody to cover my shift for the night that U2 was playing at Red Rocks, and I couldn't go.
Of course.
So my potential opportunity to see them at that stage in their career, which I did eventually see them, so many times after that. But man, being at that show would have been like I look at the video now and I look at people in that crowd and I'm like, yep, worked with that person. That's my sister. That's my cousin. That's somebody I worked with. That's someone I went to high school with. I see people in the video all the time and I'm like, I know these people.
The last guy I interviewed, a buddy of mine, I asked him the same question. He's like, "Well, I've always wanted to play a gig at a Cracker Barrel." I'm like, "I'll give it to you. That's pretty unique." All right. I mean, we sitting up on the
Yeah.
front porch with the rocking chairs. We're gonna do it in the gift shop. Where are we playing?
Yeah. We've done uh Wingstop,
Okay.
a Wingstop in I think
Like inside the restaurant?
no, because the restaurant was too small.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Well, we at one point we were approached by a guy who saw us playing in South Florida when he was on vacation, and I think he was in Georgia or North Carolina. It was one of those two. And we used to go to Wilmington, North Carolina, and do a live after five, and then we would do Sundown Summer Concert Series as well. So we would do those back to back. So this guy said, "Hey, when you're going to do that next time, let's do a Wingstop tour as well. I've got 4 locations that you guys will play at." And we were like, "All right, so like a mini tour." And he was like, "Yeah." So he ultimately ended up settling on only 2 locations. And we went to the first one and we got there and he wasn't around, but the manager had no idea that we were supposed to play a show. And So we got there. There was no room for us to set up our equipment inside.
Of course. Yeah.
He had hired a sound production company. So we got there and the manager said, well, I don't really know what to do with you guys. I guess we're going to have to put you in the parking lot. So we set up our gear in the parking lot with no shade, no canopy, and the sound production company set up, and we did our sound check, and we played a show for a sum total of 0 people. Nobody was there.
Yeah.
Not
You
not
get
one.
those.
We played for the sound man.
Yeah.
And so we talked to the guy and he started humming and hawing and saying, well, I mean, I don't know how there were no people there. That means, you guys didn't draw anybody. And we were like,
Means you
we're
didn't promote, buddy.
we're not from around here. Like we don't, there's nothing in our writer that says we were supposed to do advertising for this. I mean, we blast on our Facebook page, hey, we're going to be at so and so. We didn't know anybody from that town. We had never played in that town anymore. I didn't remember where it was. So he ended up already talking about, well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to pay you guys for this. And so we said, well, if we're not getting paid, we're not doing the next show, and
Right.
he was
Yeah.
like, well, no, that one should be fine. That one is inside and it has a stage, so you'll definitely get paid. So we got to that next one. We had to wait for, um, the rock band music teaching centers,
Like School of Rock?
School of Rock.
Okay, yes.
They were doing their end of semester recital
Oh
at
boy.
that, and they were doing it during the day, the same day that we were playing.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. I think I know what you're talking about.
And so we got there and we didn't know that they were doing this. We got there, we expected to walk in and load in and do our sound check. We got there and there's this group of kids all set up playing their songs and doing their recital for their parents, right? And so I don't know if you've ever been to any of those. They're good, I mean, for what it is, for 13, 14-year-old kids.
Sometimes, yes.
Sometimes they're
Sometimes
sometimes they're remarkable. Sometimes it's obvious that this
depends on the
is
program, depends on the teachers. Yeah.
totally depends on all, so many different factors.
Oh yeah.
So we, we were hooting and hollering for them. We wanted to, be as encouraging as we could. But then they liked it so much that the guy from School of Rock and some of the parents were saying, let the kids all do their songs again. Let them do their songs again. So proceeded to go through their show again. And so now this was like well into our load in and sound check time. So we just were like, well, I mean, we're here for the duration. We're here for the night. So they finished their stuff. They did their songs again. They got off the stage. We put our stuff on. We were doing our sound check. And by the time we were starting our sound check, the place was empty again because it was all the parents of the kids that were there for School of
Of
Rock.
course.
And I think it ended up getting a little bit busier later that night, but I think it was a show that maybe there was like a total of 25 or 30 people there.
I do a Tom Petty tribute band, the Petty
Oh,
Hearts.
awesome.
We were playing I think it was a festival one time, and we had a cover band opening up for us before us. And they played it was towards the end of their set, and they played a Tom Petty song.
Oh.
Okay. And they're like, "Oh, you like that, huh? Well, we know this other Tom Petty song and that one." And they just kept on going and going,
Oh,
playing a whole set of Tom Petty songs.
yeah. We had that at a venue that we played one time where all of the music that the guy was playing all day was U2.
Oh
And
man.
and we had in our rider no U2 music on the in-house sound system before our show, you know, because the last thing we want is people comparing us to the actual band,
Right.
you know. And even people that are at some of these places, they don't want to hear U2 all day, you know.
No, yeah.
Like they get tired of it,
This
unless
band
you're a
played like a
hardcore
30-minute set
fan.
of Tom Petty songs right before we went on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
One thing you don't
That's
do,
brutal
man.
stuff. Yeah,
All
brutal
right,
stuff.
last question before we wrap it up, man. One more
Okay.
question. I'll let you go, man. By the way, this was incredible. Thank you so much, man. These are great stories.
My pleasure. Yeah, I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity and asking me to come
Thank
on.
you. If you can talk to your younger self, what advice would you give them?
I would tell myself to be a lot less nervous than I used to be because early on, nerves were a real problem for me to the point where I never really got comfortable with myself as a performer when I was trying to get a deal and doing my original music and when I was playing just cover tunes, right? Like I always felt comfortable with my voice. I always felt like I could hit my parts and I felt comfortable with my guitar playing and my keyboard playing. And in the cover band that I was in that I toured with for a number of years, it was a full-time band. So my chops were solid, like that was all I did was played music and it was great. I loved it. But I never really embraced the idea of being on stage and feeling like I had something that I could bring to that element of a show or of an experience. And so I kind of never really felt comfortable or felt confident or felt great with it, right? And it wasn't until I started doing the U2 tribute stuff where I was like, I had this epiphany one day where I was like, really, this is like an acting gig where I get to use my voice and play a little guitar. And so I kind of told myself, I was like, just approach it like you're acting like you're Bono and take a look at what Bono does on stage and try to bring at least some elements of that persona into your show. And I kind of early on just hid behind it, right? And I was like, okay, it's acting. I'm acting and I'm pretending to be Bono. And I'm saying things that I think Bono might say, or I would even, obviously lift some of his iconic lines from some of their touring DVDs, that the things that people know, like, am I bugging you? I don't mean to bug you from, the Zoo TV tour. Um, and and so that for me was like so empowering to get comfortable bringing a persona onto a stage and fortunately being able to do it in front of an audience that buys in, right? Because if they're willing to suspend their disbelief for me, then it's just like this U2 show, right? It's a U2 themed show where the persona is trying to be the same thing. So it never really felt like it was me, like even though I would get to say and slip in things that I really believe and things that are a part of my core values as well regarding, you know, anti-racism and being against anti-Semitism and Nazism and being against people who want to marginalize anybody for whatever it is in their life that people think is a cause to marginalize them by, whether it's LGBTQIA or people who are a different color or whatever it is, whatever that is that people use to be, discriminatory against each other. I like the opportunity of being able to be in this Bono persona and say some of what I think about those things, and it fits within the mold of the show, right? So that's been really empowering. And what I've noticed is in performing my own material now, which I do up here on Long Island, right now still acoustic, but I'm in a new cover band up here, and we're going to start bringing some of my originals into our show, which is huge for me. I'm so happy to be able to do that,
That's awesome.
and I'm really looking forward to being able to be on a stage with some of these musicians that are in this band that I'm in are just monsters. They're all East End, Long Island, great musicians, totally reliable, really good at their craft. And some of the venues, like we're doing our debut at a place called the Stephen Talk House, which is in the Hamptons on Long Island, which is a club that it's not uncommon for people like Billy Joel and Paul McCartney to just pop in on the weekends because they live out there. And so, Coldplay plays on this stage. Joan Osborne does a show there every single year. Paul McCartney does shows there. Paul Simon does shows there. And it's a dive hole in the wall honky tonk bar with a great sound system and a decent sized dance floor and room for about 350 people. And the stage is low and it's got very fundamental basic lighting, but it's a place that world class bands will show up and do shows to either test out material that they want to take on tour with them, or to just do something intimate for their really hardcore, extremely wealthy Hamptons based fan base, right? So we're doing our debut there, which for me is huge, right? It's a big
Nice.
deal for me. It's a place I've always wanted to play ever since I knew that it existed. And we're doing that on April 18th. And I'm really, really stoked about it.
Well, let's let us know where we can find your stuff. Where do we go to check out some of your original work, some of your other bands? Where can we find you at?
So the music that I release as my original music, which right now I only have one song that's on all of the streaming services, but it's under the name The Louder You Hush. And I don't have a website for The Louder You Hush. I just have the one song from a release that I did a few years ago. And it's just one trigger single that I put up there because I felt like, okay, I'm going to start populating this with the rest of my original music. And I'm going to release most of that original music under the name The Louder You Hush, which is the original band name that I formed a number of years ago. And even though none of the guys from that original lineup are still going to be working in it, all the material was my original material anyways. And so whatever we bring into um, whatever I start to release on online now is going to be under that name.
We can
And
also
so,
drop some links in the description below. We can copy and paste them so people can direct you to any pages you might want them to check out, or EPKs, promos, past work.
okay, I'll send you some stuff.
We can definitely do that.
All
All
right,
right, man.
that's
Well, thank
awesome.
you so much for joining me, man. And I'm gonna let you get back to your day. And this was a blast. Thank you.
All right, yeah, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. And I don't know if any of my stories were necessarily funny enough, but um
I had a
it
great
was
time.
really
I
it
thought they
was
were.
really all right. That's great. That's great to know, TJ. And again, thanks for having me on. And I would talk this stuff with you anytime because you and I, the same stuff that I'm dealing with. So
I'm sure you'll think of things when we turn off, like, oh, I should have said that. I should have said that, because there's so much stuff.
yeah,
It's hard to
yeah,
recount it all right, on the
yeah.
spot.
Yeah, I got all kinds of stories. So if there's ever a time you want to revisit this and have me on for another segment, I'm down.
Absolutely. Yes, we can. All right,
All
man. We'll
right,
have a
cool.
great day, man. Thank you so
All right, you
much.
do the same.
Thank you.
Take care, bro. Bye.